All right, so we got a few things together. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so this is the month of September can be, man, I love it and I hate it. I have a love-hate relationship with the month of September. And so I've been doing these top baits of the month now for quite a while. Now we try to be more consistent throughout the year, this year, and give you guys a lot of information on what's going down. This baits of the month, I am gonna throw a couple of them in there that I don't believe I've really ever put in a top baits of the month before. And I'm more like a type of lure, Now, right now you can tell I'm like, it's hot where I am at right now. And it's been very warm. It's been a hot year, but it's also been sort of like, you have rain, for a week. And it's been, wet some of the areas that I've been at. But, for me, it's really just like September. I'm ready for things to cool down. And this is when, the biggest transition will happen. The days are getting shorter. The fish know that. And that's what really starts to make that push. I really feel like August is the start of that transition. September is legitimately the transition month. A lot of times the start of the drawdown happens at some point in September or early October. You start to have cold fronts this month. And so when I'm thinking about that, I'm also thinking about multiple different things of how I'm going to combat that. Typically, if I had to say September in a nutshell, I would call it the junk fishing month. Hands down. Like, you can junk fish this month. Offshore is like starting to get to the point where it's not as good as what it has been throughout the whole season. Now, some places it could be, but we got some work to do. We got some work to do. We're going to dive into it right now. So let's do it.
Let's go.
We're here in Mexico. We are in the Dominican Republic. So I'm going to tell you a couple different tips that have helped me over the years.
Unbelievable!
Jacob Wheeler makes history!
So to this video, I'm gonna bring a map out, old Kingfisher map. You guys like the old paper maps. I have a few of them, and this one's Watts Bar. So there's actually an open on Watts Bar, Bass Open, which is like literally 45 minutes that way. So yeah, I'm gonna sort of talk about Watts Bar in this scenario. Not necessarily like specifically, but just in general, sort of show that up. So first bait I'm going to pick for this month, overall, is gonna come down to, this one is really unique in the fact of anglers out there might or might not have done this. But it's really gonna be a punch rig. Punching, how do you use a punch rig? What's going on? For me, September's a great month to use to punch. Here on Chickamauga, places all over the country that have hydrilla, matted vegetation, the hotter it gets, sometimes this fish will get in that grass, and grass is a huge player when it is hot outside, or in those first couple cold fronts. I feel like this is, if you have grass in your lake, this is the month that you want to either be flipping that grass, punching that grass, throwing some sort of bait around the grass, okay? Now we have some other things later on in this video for the other anglers out there that don't have grass around their bodies of water, because they're not everywhere. But real quick for those anglers, I throw, typically, a 3/4 ounce weight to, 3/4 ounce weight to, up to an ounce and a half, 2 ounce if it's really thick vegetation, depending on what it is. Right here, I have the new cleanup crawl from Rapala. It's not available yet. I apologize. It's just the bait I've been throwing and I've been punching, so I just have to say this. It's just a really good crawl style bait. It's not too big a profile. It gets into the mat. So a crawl style bait for me it was one of my favorite options. There's other ones out there on the market. If you can't get them right now, you probably have a few in your tackle box that can work just fine. But this one right here, I love. It has a little bit more meat into it to where I can actually, put that hook in there and it's not gonna pop out and catch the mat really well, or not catch the mat, but when a fish bites it, I set the hook and I get that fish in the boat. A little bit of action. I like a little bit of action as well. And one thing I really love about this one actually is the color. Okay, you're gonna be like, what? It's a green pumpkin. Actually, this is a green pumpkin watermelon. And I don't know if you guys can see this, but it literally is a two-tone. So it's watermelon's really dark on the backside. and then it's light underneath, like on the top. Basically, it's the top, it's the bottom. It's light underneath. Now I'm punching with a 4/0 straight shank hook, the new red line flipping hook. That's the hook that I'm punching with. And the reason I am is because vanadium steel, it's a lighter diameter hook, but it's still very strong. I don't really want a lot of flex in my punching hooks, and this hook does a good job of an in-between, and that's why I'm choosing that. Now, typically you don't want to go too crazy big in your punching hook, because the bigger the hook, the more it's going to be able to catch the grass when you're trying to get that fish out of there. As far as rods go, I have this one on a 710. And this one's more the black ice from Duck Fishing. But basically the key is a parabolic bend 7.6. I do punch with my 7.6 heavy if I'm just trying to sort of like utilize something, but this is sort of the rod I punch with. It's 710. It's and it's more of a parabolic bend. This is actually an extra heavy, I believe. Yeah, it is. But it's not, it's like a parabolic bend, in meaning like it's actually got a lot, it actually bends down the rod a decent amount up in here. So that sort of helps it, like when you load, like, and one thing I will say about this too, one more thing. All right, so we got our lights back on, and a question I was gonna ask you, because this is something that I wanna hear from the viewers. It's actually a little bit become a little bit more of a controversy. Every time I've ever punched, and when I was punching for the most part, starting out in my career, I would always utilize a snell knot. And a snell knot, when you push down on that knot, it kicks up. And I have a video on there on my channel. It's you know, I probably might redo it one day to have a little better image of exactly what went down. But what happens when you snell, I think sometimes if you snap set, when you set the hook real fast and like slackline them, that hook pops up and like it doesn't catch them. Like sometimes it's better if you slackline them and you pitch in there and you slackline them, like, and you just go to drop your rod to go straight a Palomar knot or a straight knot straight to the eye of the hook. So I want to sort of hear you guys' opinion on that. I've to snell or not to snell, I'm not really sure. I go back and forth on it. I've had success in both ways. But when I'm pitching, I'm just pole setting, you know, and really just letting the rod load up. I think a snell is the deal, but I don't always do that. It's hard sometimes. So punching grass is that. Now I'm going to show you real quick here before we jump into anything. I'm going to show you guys sort of like what I'm going to look for if I'm punching grass on this body of water right here. Now I don't know if Watts Bar has a ton of grass or not. I've not been up there. I don't really fish up there that much, but I'm trying to fish it like 4 days. But it's a big body of water, but this is sort of, it's a highland reservoir. Here's the dam down here. This is the lower end. There's some bigger major creeks, places like that. You know, everywhere there's blue is basically a flat. And so when I look at that, like the flats, it's actually basically saying 0 to 21 feet. I don't think it's like, it says basically, well, I guess it could be like 0 to 21. But if you look at it real close, these maps are definitely not sea maps. This is not Lake Master a sea map. But looking at it, you can tell like the blues are the flats, the darker blues. And so like looking at that, like I'm gonna look at the areas either like the main lake bars that have grass, or like in the backs of the creeks that have like defined edges. Those places are the places I'm gonna look first, the main lake flats or the backs of the creeks that have the major flats, creek channels running through them. That's the kind of stuff that I'm gonna utilize to really look for when I'm looking for grass to punch in the fall. So that's that. On to the next one. This one is gonna be more so revolving around, this one I don't believe I've had on the channel. I might've had it once, but it sort of got thrown on the map 5-6 years ago. Kevin won on a tournament on the St. Lawrence River on a spy bait. And so I've played with it. You don't hear a lot about it for largemouth, but this is the time of year when like schooling really starts to become a major player. Late August, early September. Fit the bait size, bait's starting to be everywhere. This year's hatch of small threadfin in a lot of scenarios down south and even in the Midwest, it's all starting to really, or even like gizzard shad that are smaller right now. those fish are feeding on those smaller bait fish. And I think a spy bait really imitates that very well. Now, if you're a smallmouth angler as well, or even a spotted bass angler, this is a great technique for you as well. So Clearwater, Highland reservoirs, great. Okay, great bait to throw. But do not limit this technique to just those bodies of water. I've actually caught some really nice fish out here on Chickamauga on this bait right here, and this is an Arashi spin bait. And so basically it's just our version of Arashi, and I'm not even sure, you know, which color you should go with. Personally, I like more translucent colors. Again, I'm trying to imitate a smaller bait fish. It's not a very aggressive action. Has a very small wiggle, but you're seeing like things transition in bass fishing where subtle is becoming better. Subtle is becoming more powerful in triggering fishing and biting. And as we get more pressure, those subtle actions, I believe, are gonna be the key in catching pressure fish. So I think you're gonna see a resurgence of spy baiting overall long term, but it's a really good bait to throw whether you're in backs of pockets, around the grass as well. It's something that gets bites. And so same sort of scenario, I'm gonna pull up this map. Now I will be using that like on a spinning rod, 7-foot medium action, lighter braid, 8-pound nano braid, probably a 10-pound fluorocarbon leader, Suffix fluorocarbon leader. And I am probably gonna be focusing more on grassy areas and or flats, points, rocky points, places they're gonna hoard that bait up there. Backs of creeks, major points. I think this, as I'm sort of talking about this, I think the biggest thing you got to understand in the fall is flats are truly the key for the bass. If there's one thing you learn from this video, the flats on your bodies of water. Now a flat can be in the back of a creek, it can be on the main lake, it can be on a side of a pocket. There's a lot of things you could say, well, was it a 10-foot flat? Is it a 20-foot flat, Jacob? Like, what are you meaning? Like, I'm saying 5 foot or less is really what is the key in junk fishing that depth zone. For the most part, for me, that's what I believe. I feel like the majority of the congregations of bass are utilizing the flats in September, and that's where I'm gonna focus, and that's why I'm talking about, hey, that spy bait, or spin bait, or punching the grass, or what's going on, because I believe the majority of the shad and the bait fish go to those areas. So that's what, just to give you guys an understanding on that. Now, jumping into something a little bit different here, wood is a great way to target. Wood's a good thing to target in the fall. Shallow wood, laydowns, trees, docks are really good isolated stuff. And one thing that I'm really big on this time of year is streamlined baits. I talked about it in the last month, 10-inch worms, stuff like that. But this one I'm gonna talk about like streamlined flipping worms, like more of like a trick worm style worm. It's like more like a speed worm style, stuff like, hog style, even like a lizard. That's a messed up lizard probably, but those are like more streamlined profile baits that I am gonna be really utilizing in this month more than anything. Again, things are starting to, cool down a bit. But in the same regard, I feel like streamlining your profiles, your baits are gonna generate more bites. I think we get away sometimes of shaky head fishing. That's a great bait to throw or a great technique to use on a spin rod, but just pitching like a straight tail worm with like a 1/4 ounce weight can really generate a lot of bites this time of year. Whether you're, fishing wood, docks, grass, does not matter. That seems to be a really good technique. Now, as far as colors, you guys, we keep it pretty simple. This is a black and blue if the water's dirtier, green pumpkins. It really just depends on what you personally want to throw in your favorite color. A lot of people like watermelon. I'll tell you an old school color that I've never seen thrown. I want to hear this one too. If you throw pumpkin seed, still to this day, pumpkin seed, let me know. Drop a comment below for my OGs out there. You know what I'm saying? Pumpkin seed. You got to throw them out. I do remember catching them on pumpkin seed back in the day. Old school, 7-inch power worm. I do remember that. So I've not thrown pumpkin seed probably in 10 years, but I want to hear from my OGs or new fishermen that really like that color pumpkin seed and have had, because I think resurgence of colors and actions can happen. So if that's happening out there, let me know. Now, as far as hooks go in this particular technique, especially with worms, I have a hook that I love. And it's called a red line hook, VMC hybrid worm hook. Okay, the key with the worm hook for me, and I've talked to you guys about that, is that point, that bite between that hook point and that line tie. If that line tie is in line with that point, I am not buying that hook for a worm. It's not happening for me. You guys can see line tie, hook point, plenty of bite, hookup, that equals hookup ratio, hook to land ratio. The problem is a lot of times when you're talking about a worm, big worms, small worms, whatever, that is the issue with most worm hooks. So if you have issues with a worm hook out there, look at that worm hook and say, if you don't have some bite, check out those red line worm hooks from VMC, and I'm telling you, I've not had any issues with that one at all. As far as like line, 17 pound, 15 to 17, 14 to 17 is pretty much what I throw. You know, that in between line size. I don't really need I don't want to overpower, if I'm throwing that worm in a 1/4 ounce weight, I do not want to overpower the bait. So if I go up to like 20, it's just too much drag on that bait and that bait's not acting correctly. So that's why I'm not going to do that. 7.3 is actually 7.3 heavy. More of an in-between. So I can just sort of pitch around. It's more like the junk fishing, 7.3 heavy, pitch around, cast around, skip around sort of scenario. Okay, next on the list, it's 3 of them. Next on the list for me is really going to be, I had to bring some topwater into this because this really is a good topwater month. Every month past July in my mind, really every month's a great topwater month if I can make it happen, because you guys know I love to throw a topwater. But this is a bait that I think is underutilized when all the topwaters, when you think of topwater fishing. This is a type of lure or a category that does not get talked about very much anymore. And I think if we can bring that back for some of my viewers out there that utilize this, I think you're going to generate a lot more bites. I personally have seen it happen. I played around with it out here at the house, and I think it works very well. I've seen some success, and so without further ado, it's just an old school skitter pop, popping style baits, skitter pop, small popping style baits. Okay, this is not a pop R. Pop R's or like a like this is like a X pop. It's bloop, 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 bloop. You know, you get that little bloop, bloop, bloop. Whereas skitter pop, it's more of like a spitting action. So it spits like a fleeing little shad. This is like, I think the size number, I believe it's a number 5. Pretty sure. Number 5, yeah. This one's a number 5, this one's a number 7. You probably aren't gonna be able to throw. Now, the BFS, like the bait finesse system, I've not got into that. I know some people who think that's cool, and I know some really cool friends of mine that are on that deal and love it. But that number 5 would be a great one for a bait finesse if you really want to get on that on a small spinning or a small bait caster. If you're more traditional tournament style, I'm probably going to go with that number 7. That's the kind, chrome, bone, shad profile, shad colors. And I'm going to fish, again, not trying to be redundant, but I'm going to be fishing a lot of the flats, a lot of the shallower points, a lot of that 5 foot and less. That's where I'm going to be throwing this bait. Seawalls can play as well, lay down, stuff like that. Shallow water, visual targets for the most part, or, you know, flatter areas that I can just say, hey, you know, there's rock out here on this flat, even like gravel points, stuff like that, where those fish are going to be hoarding the bait up there. Same sort of scenario. But try this out, because I think we're sort of, years ago, I grew up throwing smaller topwater baits like the skitter pop right here, and I don't want to forget about it. I'm telling you, it's good. So that being said, we had the topwater. Next on the list, how many is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I have 2 more after. Well, 1 more after this one. So as it's been more bait related, we talked about grass punching, we talked about topwaters, we talked about everything else. And let me jump in. Well, let me jump into this one, because VMC came out with a bait I worked on, or a head that I worked on with them. It's called a swinging Ned head. We actually won Best of Show for terminal tackle at ICAST with this exact head. Problem is, it is not going to be out yet. So I have to show you why I'm excited about this. So let me just explain. So you can start to do this with a shaky head, like a small shaky head, but it's gonna, like, when this becomes available, this is gonna be the deal. So it's basically a finesse Ned head, and what am I gonna use with that? Of course, a Ned style bait. This one right here is the BLT, which is coming out here soon. But this one, for me, like Green Pumpkin Magic, is a great color in the fall because it's more shad imitator, okay? Ned rigs have become a huge player in smallmouth spotted bass fisheries across the country and largemouth fisheries. We have seen where our fish get pressured more than ever before, and I'm come to realize that a small little profile worm like this is now very much so a tournament bait for a lot of anglers out there when you're talking about largemouth. I know I said it's crazy, I know, but it's also phenomenal if you're just wanting to get bites and fish on the bank. So that's something, a floating material for me, like TPE, like that Crush City, BLT is what I prefer. And what this basically head does, this is like that swing in Ned. It is articulated, it has a full swinging motion with that, and this is actually like the 3/16. Right here, you know, I actually, rather than traditional Ned head fishing, I actually fish this exposing it, Texas rigging it. So it's a head, most of the time I fish it like this. So I can fish around brush, rock, wood, all that stuff, and I still have that free range of motion. I don't lock my Ned head down. If you put it on a shaky head, you're sort of locking and negatively impacting the action of the worm. And with this, I have a lot more range of motion. When I look at it in my pool and see that, in addition to that, when that head hits the bottom, that worm stands straight up. Even if I have a 1/4 ounce weight, it's gonna do that. I've caught some really nice fish actually pitching this little Ned head, with like a 7-foot medium heavy action casting rod. And I don't know if it's, you know, always gonna be a tournament deal, but I've caught some good fish doing it. I just think that these fish are pressured, and sometimes we have to give them something different. So if you're going out there on a Saturday morning and you only get one thing to bring with you, and you're running the banks on local bodies of water that are public bodies of water, this might be the technique that might help you out to generate a few bites that morning and not get skunked in the month of September. I do like that Green Pumpkin Magic color because I think that flake, when it's falling, looks again like the bait fish and the shad, smaller bait fish that we are, that year's hatch of everything. Whether it's even in New York, whether it's small perch, whether it's smaller profile bait. I mean, heck, there was a lead event up on the Champlain last week, and they were catching them on, you know, on some like small, like the smallmouth were eating small bait. Same thing. It's really all over the country, some sort of small, that year's hatch of that bait is the key. But Ned rig, Ned head, and that swinging Ned, when it becomes available, or a shaky head, can work in this scenario. You're gonna get hung up a little bit more than this, but it's a good way to generate bites. So Ned head. Now, jumping into the lake right here, the map. Now this might be a little bit different. I'm gonna actually talk about some steeper cover in this scenario. I'm gonna talk about some really steep banks, bluff style banks that I think this will play. You know, channel swings, boom, boom. These big giant swing out here, boom. That's gonna be good stuff, as well as shallow in the backs of the pockets and creeks, lay down logs. That's gonna be a definitely good deal. Way backs in the backs of the creeks and the flats. Sort of like, you know, a lot of the other stuff I was talking about. Those are places, but steeper banks are gonna be good as well. And typically wood, docks, down main lake stretches are gonna be a good way to catch numbers of fish. So that being said, that is almost the last one. And the last is just, you gotta have it in here in the month of September. is a flat side and a square bill. I had it in the last one. I have to talk about it again. This flat side, this is an OG tiny. This bait runs about 3 feet deep, has a really tight wiggling action. If you're trying to finesse crank and you get around a lot of pressure on your bodies of water, it actually rides through cover really, really, really well. And, you know, I'm cranking around wood, rock, all that flatter stuff, again, flats. But that's, I mean, shad and like a foil shad. I'm not trying to be redundant, but this is September for you all. I know that's how it is. Tighter wiggling crankbait like this, or if I'm cranking around a lot of wood, like a main river scenario, if I'm going way up a river, water's dirty in the backs of the creeks on channel banks, more of a square bill, and this is the Rocco. So, you know, shad pattern, stained water, two of my favorites like that. Bumping that around laydowns, it can generate a lot of bites. So crankbaits, you gotta have it because I'll tell you, okay, I'll jump back into this. A classic a long time ago, one of the, I truthfully believe it's the best, probably the best moment in tournament bass fishing. When Takahiro won the Classic, when he pulled out like that Bagley crankbait, right? And if you guys don't remember that, I was actually at that Classic, which it was amazing. To watch it over, I still watch it 4 times a year to this day. Like, I love it. Like, that moment, like, they set it up perfect. They got this crankbait out. He pulls it out. I knew it. I knew they were here. He catches 3 in the last 15 minutes, and he caught them by making a subtle adjustment to his square bill. He caught, I think, 1 around a laydown. But sometimes the fish in that stained water up those rivers, it just gets bites. And we get so caught up with worms and this and that, and there's something special about a crankbait that generates bites, especially in the dog days of summer and in that transition. And so I just sort of had to bring that one up because that one was pretty impactful for me, watching that and being at that event. And that's sort of like, you know, I'm not gonna say it started my passion for the sport, but that was sort of cool. And we are in sort of the similar time of year, and I'm holding a square bill. Now this one's pretty good as well. So anyway, hope you guys enjoyed this video. I will end that with talking about, like, in that scenario when I was talking about up the rivers. This is a huge lake, by the way. Holy smokes. Right there's up a river. Way up in the backs of these rivers scenarios, like way in the backs of those, again, probably flat or channel banks in these smaller rivers. Stained water is typically the key if you're gonna throw a crankbait. So I want a 1.5 foot or less typically. But that's the move. That's the move. We ran down it all. We had the month of September is here, and I wanna know if you guys are having success with this. This is really something that is cool. Before we jump off here, I was at the tackle store right up here, Real Deal Tackle here in Dayton, and there's a young angler that came up to me and said, man, we really appreciate and love these videos that you guys do. We love this video so much because it gives us a starting point. They're not tournament anglers, they're not really like hardcore tournament anglers, but it gives them something that, like, hey, a starting point every month to look at and sort of see where to start at. And so that meant a lot to me. That means a lot to me. I don't always get to chance in the middle of the season to comment below. I'm gonna try to do a little bit better and try to answer your guys' questions and comment below on what you guys are asking and questions you're asking. Because I want, like, now the season's over, I'm like, I wanna teach, you know, I want this to be a teaching moment. I want this to be some of this knowledge that I've learned over the years. It's helped me. I wanna bring that to you all. And that's important to me. So that's why I do this. This is not about, I just feel like if this helps one person catch a few more bass, it was worth it. And so I appreciate you all following along, watching these videos, and we will see you on the next video. Thank you all.